So let's take a closer look in our example using shared attributes, constructors, and the whole thing that we were talking before. So in this case right here, we're gonna have our main class, our only class in this example. We have two attributes, and we also have a constructor in which we are defining an attribute called num, and it's going to take a default value of 42. Don't mistake yourself. This here is the object attribute, and this is the class attribute. They have the same name, but they're completely different, okay? So what we're doing here is we are creating two instances, right? One is the x and the other is y. One we are passing an argument, the other we are not, and then we're going to compare if the attribute none is the same between the object and the class. And as we can see here, as we'll see, they're not the same because one is for the object and the other one is for the class, even though they have the same name. Is just to show how it works. And then we're going to print those values, and we're going to print the class value and the object value. All right. Also, remember when we talked about that class objects, they are shared between instances of the same class, or in other words, the objects that they share a class attributes, they're the same for all the objects. So in this case right here, we'll compare if x done is the same as y done, and then we're going to do the same thing for num. Hopefully you saw there is a difference. One of them, we are creating a new one in the constructor, which means that this here, this attribute is specific for each object that we have for that class, while the done attribute right here, it's common for all the objects within that class. All right. So if we go ahead and run our example right here, let's just move forward here a little bit. As we can see, the object and the class attribute for both x and y objects, they are not the same as the one in the class, and the values they're pretty much different, but you see here that the class attribute remains unchanged because all the objects within the class, they have the same attribute. All right. Now, if we look here, let's take a look on how they are the same or not. When we are comparing the done attribute with the class between the objects, we'll see that's true. And we compare the none attributes, we see they're different. And why is this happening? If we go ahead and take a look in our code right here, we'll see that the done attribute only exists at a class level. So when the Python interpreter is looking for this attribute, it won't find anything at the object scope level in the constructor, for example, and then it moves to the class in which it finds. And both x and y, they have the same attribute done. But when we take a look on none, things are a little bit different. Because even though they have the same name, they're initialized in a different way for a different object. So the num object, they won't be the same between the objects, and as we can see here, it's false. Okay. Now let's take a look on how this we mentioned about scope, right? So it's probably a good idea to talk about scope a little bit. Now, if we take a look and we print the first attribute from object 1, x, we're going to see which value, 42 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully we'll understand what's happening. And then after that, we're going to delete this attribute, and you can use the delete x num. So we're going to delete whatever this attribute exists in x, and then we're going to print it out the second search again. So let's see what happens here. So as we can see in the scope search, the first attribute search from object 1, which is x, has the value of 42, and then if we delete that and we print it out again, we're going to have the value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why is this happening? The first attribute is taking into consideration the attribute inside the constructor, inside the object. So when we printed out that x dot num, we are printing out the default value that was received there. So in this case here, 42. The thing is, when we call the delete x num, we delete the num attribute at an object level, and then the only one remaining there is the class level, which we have presented for us when we printed out x num again in this line right here. All right? Now we ask, what would happen if we delete this again? So we moved from the object level to the class level, and if we delete it, what's going to happen? Well, hopefully you will understand that if we delete the other one and try to print, the outcome won't be as good, right? And as you see here, we're not able to delete that again, because then there's only the attribute of the class itself, so you won't be able to remove this anymore through the object, only through the class. All right? So thank you and happy coding.